Good morning and welcome to Rising. I'm Robby Soave.
And I'm Kim Iversen. Ryan is on vacation, but we look forward to having him and Emily return next week. Happy to be here.
We have a great show for you all today, but first, Illinois Congressman Adam Kinzinger has accepted a position on the January 6th House Committee investigating the Capitol riots, the first hearing taking place tomorrow. Speaker Nancy Pelosi announced the appointment on Sunday, just days after barring Jim Jordan and Jim Banks from serving on the panel.
House Minority Leader Kevin McCarthy has called the investigation a sham. In response to the appointments, he released a statement in part saying, "The Speaker has structured this select committee to satisfy her political objectives. She had months to work with Republicans on a reasonable and fair approach to get answers. Instead, she has played politics." Yeah, I mean, I absolutely think that this is obviously not an objective panel.
Yeah, I mean, we're still talking about this. It's clear, both sides have picked what they already think. For Democrats, for, kind of mainstream liberals, January 6th represents the worst thing to ever happen in all of, human history. And they're going to keep beating that drum, for good reason, because it was a bad thing that happened. It's an embarrassing thing to Trump and Republicans who have really kind of tried to excuse it and say, well, maybe it was actually Antifa who did it. Maybe it was actually Democrats. So I think the behavior, obviously, of Republicans has been quite bad. That said, Democrats, can't talk about anything else. It's the media's favorite subject. We're going to be discussing having committees and hearings and investigations for the rest of our lives, when I think most people know this was a bad thing, but maybe we can move on and get something done in Washington.
Oh, you can bet. You can believe that we will be hearing about this ad nauseum all the way through the midterms, maybe even into the 2024 presidential election. Kind of depends, I think, on whether or not it looks like Trump is actually going to run again. But, look, I mean, when it comes to this investigation, clearly Democrats just found the two Republicans they could find who were the most anti-Trump, who already went into this who are going into the investigation with their minds made up. And that's the one of the big problems about this. I mean, for one, I don't think Americans believe when, most of us are outside of the Beltway. We don't know exactly how Capitol Hill is run. But when you find out that Nancy Pelosi has the power to tell Republicans who and who they cannot appoint to this sort of panel, it kind of makes us scratch our heads and say, wait a minute, how is it possible that this is the way this works? And secondly, when you're bringing in people who've already clearly made their points and their opinions known on how they feel about the subject. I mean, imagine going into a court and the jury's already made up their minds. I mean, we've seen this time and time again, and it's extremely problematic in the justice system, and it should be problematic in any investigation. It doesn't matter if it's a civil investigation just here in our hometowns or if it's a congressional investigation. We demand that there's an objective investigation, that it is fair, that people are going to be asking good questions. And when you're putting people on like Liz Cheney and Adam Kinzinger to this panel, clearly who have made up their minds, there is just no way that, Nancy Pelosi sitting there saying that, this will bring the American public faith in the system, that it's fair. And it's like, how is this even remotely fair? Not that
I'd like to see that. An investigation that would bring the American public faith in this system again, right?
Exactly. So, I mean, look, I just don't even trust that this is all going to be just a partisan sham that is meant to fan the flames and get people elected. That's all that this is.
Yeah, I think it's hard to disagree with that. Representatives Kinzinger and Cheney are the only two Republicans on the committee. According to reports, a growing number of rank-and-file House Republicans want the two punished for accepting their positions. And the Freedom Caucus is pushing for McCarthy to file a motion to vacate Pelosi from the speakership, which, that's obviously not going to go anywhere. It's so funny because Republicans will rail against cancel culture. And I also, I'm not a Republican exactly, but I'm very much against cancel culture. I think people on the right are correct to criticize some of the overreaches of progressivism in terms of what you're allowed to say and to think. But then, of course, anyone who departs from kind of like the most wildly pro-Trump consensus on the right is immediately unpersoned by the team. So it's just kind of, it seems like it's a hypocritical commitment to a diversity of ideas and to free speech and to a range of opinions. No, at the end of the day, if you bash leadership, if you bash the kind of pro-Trump consensus, you're not going to be welcome in that club. Now, on the other hand, you'll be elevated to hero status in the mainstream media. You can be on CNN all the time. You can be lionized for standing up. So there's a kind of advantage to doing it that way. But I just think it's funny.
Well, I'm just waiting for the day that Liz Cheney and Adam Kinzinger just go ahead and join the Democratic Party.
Right.
That seems to be the play, is that, going out there and you can be a hero to one side of the aisle if you're going to take a certain stance. But look, you're right in that people should be able to do and say whatever they want without fear of being punished. And one thing that I absolutely hate about politics in Washington is the fact that if you go against the establishment, whatever the establishment says, whatever the leadership in your party says, you cannot be a free-thinking person, even though the voters, elected you into your position. They're expecting you to represent them and not just fall in line with the party leadership wherever. And the party leadership most of the time is not based anywhere near where your constituents are. Like Nancy Pelosi is a Silicon Valley politician. The vast majority of Americans do not live in San Francisco, yet every Democrat in the country, whether they be from Idaho or Texas or Illinois or California, has to follow Nancy Pelosi's lead. And that is extremely problematic in our politics, the fact that everybody just has to fall in line or else.
Well, and Liz Cheney, right, is the avatar of an older form of the Republican Party, the neoconservative movement that was in charge during the aughts and then got us into the Iraq War, and their power was rightly broken. The voters do not agree with a neoconservative agenda whatsoever. Not voters within the Republican Party, certainly not voters outside of it. They don't want that they don't want to go back to that. So it's so funny that so many of the most kind of anti-Trump Republicans, but they're ideologically committed. They're coalition. They're trying to move the party, the country, back in a outdated direction that absolutely no one wants, no one thinks led to good, sane policy, sane foreign policy. We're trying to untangle ourselves from these wars and these interventions that happened under their leadership that everyone thinks is wrong. No one supports this kind of thing. So it's not going to, if you attach a principled critique or criticism of Trump, one that I think is warranted, but you attach that to the Bush agenda of the last decade, it's absolutely not going to go anywhere because nobody wants that for good reason. We're done with it.
Right, absolutely. Look, I'm not a fan at all of Liz Cheney, but I still believe that she has the right to express her opinion without fear of being punished by the heads of her party. And that's ultimately what I think most of us believe politics should be in Washington, but unfortunately that's not what they are. Ahead of Kinzinger's appointment, President Joe Biden lambasted Republicans, saying their handling of January 6th is bizarre.
Just as the Republican Party today offers nothing but fear, lies, and broken promises. No, listen, think about it. Turning on the television every day and seeing a replay what happened on January 6th and saying, I was told there were a lot of peaceful, wonderful people. God, no, I really mean to think about it. It is bizarre.
It is. I don't know how to exactly say it. It is true. So I was there to cover the January 6th riots. It is true that there were, the vast majority of the people there were peacefully there. I think they were there for reasons that were wrong in their display of trying to be, against the outcome of the election. But they did not cause violence. They were exercising their absolute ironclad First Amendment rights to protest in a civil way, and they weren't doing anything wrong. Now, a small fraction of them smashed windows, invaded the Capitol, committed crimes. So it can both be the case that something very bad happened, and also that most of the people there were not doing something that is illegal or unconstitutional or improper. So that is an important, kind of thing to differentiate that I often do not see differentiated among Democrats, the mainstream media, et cetera. We'll tell you what's on our radars next.